Welcome to Trench Diaries. Iron Coffins. Part 5.
Before we continue with Herbert's story in part 5, I have decided to skip the AI voice this time and narrate the book myself, like many of you have requested. This is the first time for me doing voiceover work, especially on YouTube, so let me know in the comments below what you think, how I can improve, and how I'm better able to hide my German accent. So please be gentle, okay? Anyway, let's get on with the book. Enjoy! At around 0600, I became aware that the boat was rocking intensely. We had left the German bay and entered the Skagerrak. At 0800, I began my watch, packed in heavy oil clothes. The sea had gone mad. Sheets of foam and spray slashed across the bridge. When hard breakers crashed against the conning tower, the boat shuddered violently. During the night, contact with the two companion boats had been lost. So, U-557 was alone in the vastness of the turbulent water desert, while we on the bridge were silently scanning the sea, the horizon, and the sky. When U-557 stood due east of the Shetland Islands, plowing her way through heaving mountains of water and foam, we changed course to west-northwest towards the Atlantic. Then, at 2300, the captain ordered another course change, due west this time. We had reached a point about 70 miles north of the Shetland Islands, with the intention of breaking through the British air and sea blockade. U-557, her diesels throbbing, made 14 knots through a lashing sea. The moon occasionally appeared from behind the flying clouds, and the four of us on watch squeezed behind the superstructure, but cascades of water periodically turned the bridge into an icy pool. The towel that I had wrapped around my neck was soaked with water, which ran down my back and chest. As I stood there, with the binoculars up to my eyes, water sloshed into my sleeves and flowed down into my boots. Suddenly, the third mate piped up. "I see a shadow, bearing 300. It looks like a freighter." I snapped around and pointed my glasses into the given direction. 6,000 or 7,000 meters ahead, a faint shadow was about to cross our path at an obtuse angle. It was heading west-northwest. "Captain to the bridge!" Werner called into the tower with a controlled and stern voice. The summons was repeated twice inside the hull, and moments later the captain appeared. Werner pointed out the target. Paulson, adjusting his eyes to the darkness, spotted the vessel immediately and said, "I'm taking over." Then he shouted into the hull, "Battle stations, right full rudder, new course, 320, both engines ahead full." The hunt was on. Paulson focused on the shadowy ship while the rest of us scanned the other sectors. The XO reached the platform and fastened the strong night binoculars atop the target-bearing transmitter, or TBT. The second seaman's mate moved in front of the torpedo data computer, and the torpedo gang rushed to the tubes. The crew was on battle stations. Meanwhile, the freighter had veered to port, showing us her stern, which meant we were now at a disadvantage. Paulson turned into the wind, which brought waves crashing against the tower from dead ahead. Displeased with the progress of the chase, the captain shouted through the speaking tube to the radio room, "Tune in on the 600-meter wavelength and monitor international traffic. If we've been detected, her skipper may call for help." As he gave his order, the target turned to starboard, settling on her previous course. The XO took fresh bearings and relayed them into the conning tower. Target speed 14 knots, course 260. The vessel was a fast new cargo ship trying to make it across the Atlantic alone. But during the first 70 minutes of our chase, we had reduced the gap considerably, and it seemed certain that she was never going to reach her destination. The chase went on, and we felt the thrill of the hunt. We could no longer feel the waves slapping our faces, nor the water streaming down our skin. Dead ahead lay our first target, and nothing else mattered. By 0300 we had managed to move ahead of the freighter and remain unseen. The freighter's radio had been silent the whole time. She had changed course at regular intervals, which made predicting her route easy and would almost guarantee the success of our attack. At 0325, our moment finally came. The captain told the XO to prepare for the shot. Cairn moved behind the TBT, trained it on the enemy, and yelled into the tower. "Tubes 1 to 4 ready for surface attack. Open tube doors. Target angle left 50. Speed 14. Range 1000. Torpedo depth 7. Stand by. Tubes 1 to 4, ready for firing, came the report from below. We waited for the freighter to make her next move. It would be her last if our calculations were correct. As it turned out, they were. The freighter made her turn exactly to the minute, swinging her bow towards us and racing straight into the trap the captain had set for her. He threw his boat around into attack position, exposing the smallest possible silhouette to the enemy. The ship bore down on us like a monster out of the darkness, closing to 1,000 meters. "Shoot, XO!" Paulson shouted. Cairn aimed once more and then barked. "Tube 1, fire! Tube 2, fire!" With two distinct thumps, the torpedoes shot out of our hull and raced towards the vessel. We focused our glasses at the shadowy mass of steel, which grew bigger by the second. Someone counted in the darkness. 35, 36, 37. Suddenly, a huge fire column rose from the freighter. The hard crash of the explosion hit our ears a moment later. The freighter's fate was sealed. Seibolt's excited voice came through the speaking tube. "Report from radio room. Vessel broadcasts as follows. German submarine. We have been torpedoed. We are sinking. 59 north." The message was not completed. Almost immediately, the freighter listed to port. I saw her crew lower a few lifeboats, while other boats dangled on the davits on absurd angles. The great broken hull stood out black against the red, yellow, and golden flames. It was terrifyingly beautiful. Paulson turned U-557 away from the sinking mass of debris. The mortally wounded ship slipped away and gently sank deeper. Then, convulsively, her bow tilted upward and she plunged, stern first, beneath the surface. Nothing was left but life rafts tossed by high waves. Our first kill had come at 04:10 on May 19th, 1941. This swift victory, achieved in an area that most U-boats tried to avoid, was an extraordinary feat and gave us at least 7,000 tons to our credit. The pressure, which had been building up for days, was released. U-557 proceeded on her new course at maximum speed. The captain put as much distance as possible between us and the scene of the sinking, on the prudent assumption that there would soon be an enemy task force in the area. I myself was completely drenched. After 9 hours on the bridge, I could barely move and shivered constantly. The water in my boots spilled over at every move as I hurried down the aluminum ladder. Peeling off my soaking wet fatigues and underwear, I hung them up to dry in the aft torpedo room, then ran through the boat butt naked and crawled into my narrow bunk. So at this point I will pause the narration for a moment to talk about U-557's attack here. I did some research to track Herbert's progress, and unfortunately it's unclear which ship U-557 sank on that day. Official records state the first successful engagement on May 29th, not May 19th, when U-557 sank the 7,290-ton British freighter Empire Storm. There are no records of British ships being sunk in this region on May 19, 1941, and also attacking a freighter from the front isn't ideal. In fact, it's extremely dangerous because you risk being rammed. This is probably a discrepancy with the English translation of the book, which I will go into detail in a separate video, because as it turns out there are a number of deviations from the original German version. But I will talk about that another time. So anyway, let's continue with the book. For several days, U-557 proceeded on the surface, both engines ahead standard. The wind was rough and the sea mountainous. The motion of the boat was a perpetual swinging, swaying, rocking, rolling, and listing. Inside, the humidity was intolerable. Moisture condensing on the cold steel hull ran in streaks down into the bilges. Food turned rotten and had to be thrown overboard. Bread became soggy and grew mold. Paper started to dissolve. Our clothes were clammy and never dried, and whatever we touched was wet and slimy. For days we had no proper navigational fix. We could never see any stars, the sun, or the moon. Only the daily trim dive brought relief from rocking and water spray. Down in the quiet depths, we finished the task we otherwise could not perform, and could have a meal in relative peace and without the food dropping into the bilges. And for an hour or two, we could recuperate while waiting for the next assault of water and wind. These routine dives were never long enough though, and surfacing always came too soon. During those days of fighting the weather, we received from headquarters a radio message of greatest significance. Our largest capital ship, the battleship Bismarck, was reported to be on a search and destroy mission in the North Atlantic, accompanied by the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen. On May 24th, all U-boats at sea were informed of Bismarck's quick victory over the British dreadnought Hood, His Majesty's mightiest ship. U-boats were advised to stand by for orders relative to Bismarck's future operation. We considered the sudden appearance of these German surface vessels in the Atlantic a major achievement. The North Atlantic had become our front yard, and sailing there would be deadly for the British home fleet as well as Allied merchantmen. Our conviction was strengthened by radio messages we intercepted from other U-boats. U-556 had sunk vessels totaling more than 30,000 tons on a last mission. U-203, U-93 and others had destroyed almost 100,000 tons of Allied shipping the previous weeks. The next day, it became our turn again. On May 25th, between sundown and dusk, we saw a smudge darkening a large section of clouds on the westerly horizon. A few minutes later, we realized that the smudge was in fact smoke rising from many smokestacks. We were on collision course with a convoy.